Jerry Seinfeld himself once had an accountant who apparently talked a lot about how much he disliked him. That actually did one time. Jerry gave him $50,000 to put into an account, and instead of doing so, the guy took the money and basically used it on drugs. And Jerry always talked about how much he really disliked the guy, never mentioned his name, of course, and that's what came across the idea for this episode called The Sniffing Accountant. I thought it was sniffling, but it's just sniffing accountant, which is a pretty good underrated episode, I feel. We have the main story of, Jerry wondering if his accountant is secretly, taking his money and putting it towards, again, other illegal substances. We got, of course, Kramer and Newman getting involved because they also gave him money as well, as they were, investing in stuff, and they had Barry as their accountant as well. Elaine was dating a guy that she worked with, who we've seen him. We see him in a couple other more appearances upcoming, and then also we have George still struggling at home. Gets a job interview, seemingly gets the job, but with one line that Sid Farkas said in the 2 episodes he's appeared. This is the first one. There's a second one later on down the line with Frank Costanza and Kramer that he appears again. There's one line that Julia Louis-Dreyfus mentions that he says twice, and it just perfectly sums up the show. But of course, we'll get into all of that as we roll through and talk about The Sniffing Accountant. So the episode opens up with Jerry, Elaine, and George at Monk's. They're just relaxing. Elaine's talking about her new boyfriend who she works with. His name's Jake Jarmel, and how he's perfect. How she likes him a lot. And George is like, "You're gonna find something wrong with him. You're gonna find something wrong with him." And usually that means it's always something very popular out of the blue, or something that Elaine didn't really think about, in an episode further down the line. Elaine dates a guy that she thinks, a moving guy, thinks absolutely perfect, until Jerry tells her to find out his views on abortion, which of course changed things. But of course this one, is just so petty and so hilarious. Even though also, again, they have another incident with the same boyfriend in the finale of season 5 over Juji fruits. But this time, of course, it's just something so petty. Of course, it's just a petty thing that Elaine just freaked out about, and it led to a breakup. But anyways, so they're talking about that. At the same time, they see Barry Prophet, who's Jerry's accountant, and Elaine's had a little bit of a history with him. All she knows who he is. She thinks he's a very trustworthy guy. He came in, and he starts talking to them, but he kept doing a lot of sniffing. And then after just talking to him, catching up, he goes to use the bathroom. So he walks away, and then Jerry and George talk about how they realized that he was doing a lot of sniffing. And of course, they start wondering, do you think maybe he could be, purchasing any, drugs or whatnot? And then Elaine was just like, that's not the case. She goes, I've known Barry for a long time. He's not a drug addict. But of course, Jerry's like, what if he is? He has my money. I trust that man with my money, basically. So of course, they even go to back to the apartment where Jerry's telling Kramer about this, and he's even uncomfortable with it also, because again, him and Newman gave money to him to put it on an investment, and of course, Kramer's asking him all these questions, like, did he use any slang or whatnot? Did he seem out of it? And then Jerry says no, but at one point he did ask to use the bathroom. And he's like, what? No way. That's even worse. That's where they always love to do. They love to go to the bathroom and, do their performances in there with the substances and whatnot. So, of course, they're very concerned. Meanwhile, George is eating dinner with his parents, of course, still miserable as crazy. Frank Costanza mentions how he ran into an old friend of his, and he works for for a company that sells bras, and they're looking to hire someone. So Frank got him George an interview for 2 o'clock on a Friday, which of course, George is like, how could you do that to me? That's my whole afternoon. I was supposed to look for sneakers that day. And of course, Frank tells you look for sneakers the next day. And then Estelle is like, he knows nothing about bras. And then he's like, well, it won't hurt for him to know some things at least going into the interview. So he tells Estelle to go get one of her bras. At first, she was just like, I'm not doing that. But then he basically just, they get into a fight. She agrees, finally go get her bra. So then Frank Costanza has this very awkward conversation with George, about like things. Cups at the front, loops in the back. Get the A, the B, the C, the D. The D is the biggest one of all of them. Just like this awkward conversation that George obviously does not want to have with his father. Then Estelle comes in, they talk about the bra, and then I guess George actually gets ketchup on her bra or whatnot. But he's getting ready to go to that interview. Meanwhile, also, Elaine mentions how Jake did something with this thing where he felt the material on her jacket, which apparently women like that. Apparently, it didn't work out though for a couple people though in this episode. But also, Elaine and Jake were just at the apartment chilling. When all of a sudden everything's going right, just how perfect everything is between them, and he had written down some of Elaine's messages, and one of her friends had a baby, but then Elaine starts criticizing for not putting an exclamation point by the message, saying that he's not excited enough for it. So they get into a fight, and that leads to them breaking up. They broke up over punctuation. A dumb exclamation point led to the breakup between Elaine and Jake Jarmel. But, of course, Jerry says, it's crazy, whatnot in the next scene. And then Kramer came in with Newman, and they're wondering if there's any update on Barry. And then, they thought maybe it's a one-time thing, but, and Elaine saying, he's not, he would do stuff like that, but Kramer, Newman, and Jerry are still concerned. So they call his office, and they find out he went to South Africa. South America, one of the two. So, then they plan to do a little bit of a stake. They're even more paranoid, so the three of them plan to do a stakeout when he gets back. So when they get back, they stake out and wait for him to enter this one bar he would go to after work. Kramer, though, goes in. They're acting like, we should be like private investigators and whatnot, which in real life, apparently, Wayne Knight mentions that before Seinfeld, he was a private investigator for about 5 years. He worked Broadway, and then he kind of was kind of in a bit of a rut, so rather than being a waiter, he had a friend who got him as a job as a private investigator. So this seems kind of cool with him, pretending to be a private investigator. At the same time, he was a real-life private investigator. So Kramer goes in. Of course, Newman wanted to go in at first, and then Jerry's like, no, you're not going to go in. Why not? You might have to give me a soda. And of course, they got into a little argument about some dental floss while they were waiting for Kramer. But Kramer goes in. This is one of the best scenes in the series. And this was the episode, of course, also in the Inside Look, where Michael Richards basically says that, he would rehearse stuff throughout the week, but for physical comedy, once the cameras rolled, stuff just happened. Which is one of my favorite, behind-the-scenes lines for sure in this series. Stuff just happened. He basically is going in trying to, act like he's some sort of like a druggie or something to see if Barry was interested at all. So Kramer goes in, smoking a cigarette. He gets a beer in a Tanger glass. And there was 2 takes to this in the end, but he adds some to the script, taking the beer and going, well, here's to feeling good all the time. And while smoking a cigarette, Michael Richards chugs that whole beer down while smoking at the same time. Everybody's jaws apparently behind the cameras were just like, but there was two takes of it, because on the first take of it, Michael Richards, which I think was even more funnier, Michael Richards burped after let out a loud burp and a lot of smoke belched out after he drank the beer, and he goes, "It's a damn good beer, huh? Yee-hoo!" But then there was a second take of it where he didn't, burp it out. He just slams it down, whatnot, and but that was like just definitely one of the best scenes. I think from that scene he won an Emmy because of that. And of course, also after that, he puts a cigarette back in his mouth and he accidentally puts it in the wrong way. He puts like the end that's smoking the hot stuff in on the wrong end, right in the brown spot he's supposed to be like blowing on. But yeah, that was just a classic scene. But of course, he tries to make conversation with Barry, but then Barry basically is freaked out by him and says he's going to use the bathroom. When he comes back, he's going to sit somewhere else. So Kramer follows him to the bathroom and takes a picture while he's on the toilet. So then they go back meanwhile, George goes to that interview. He's interviewed by Sid Farkas. And George tells some story about how, bras interested him and whatnot. How he's fascinated by it. He also mentioned cups in the front, loops in the back, this and that. Farkas was impressed by him. And then Julia Louis-Dreyfus mentions that there's this one line, and of course Farkas says it in this episode, and in a future episode he appears in again also. He says this one line, and again, like I've said before, I know Jerry Seinfeld in one Inside Look said that this show should have been called Dumb Luck. But this line just like epitomizes the phrase dumb luck. Because whenever he told George he was going to hire, Farkas told George he was going to hire him, he tells him, "Well, I can see, barring any unforeseen incident, you have a bright future here." And yes, barring any unforeseen incident. And it's just basically setting up for something's going to happen and go downhill. So George basically, he told to come in Monday at 9, and George goes, "If you don't mind, sir, I'll come in at 8. And Farkas is like, "Excellent." So George is now briefly hired as a bra salesman. George goes out into the hallway and sees a woman who ends up being Farkas's boss. And George finds her attractive, feels her material on her jacket. She's not taking lightly to this, so she freaks out and calls out Farkas and says, Who's this man?" And he says, "This is Costanza, he's a new bra salesman." He goes, "Well, if he's employed on Monday, you aren't. It's your choice." And fortunately, Farkas had to fire George on the spot right there, which of course his parents gave him an earful for later. Now, funny enough, actually, the girl who played Farkas's boss, Krista Miller, she actually appears, I think, in season 6 in the Doodle episode, as she plays one of George's girlfriends, Paula. But of course, that's also not the last time we see Sid Farkas, as again, he does later say, barring some unforeseen incident, which also comes back to bite him, not just himself, but also Frank Costanza and Kramer as well, as they were trying to come through on a deal with the Bro or Manzier, of course, as they argued over the actual name of it. Of course, Elaine and Jake, even though they've broken up, they still work together also on some piece of writing from Pendant Publishing. It's the first time we also see Mr. Lippman for a while also. Forgot to mention that. But basically, she was called into Lippman's office because I guess while they were writing, they put in a ton of exclamation points, and Lippman basically had told her to stop with the exclamation points, pretty much. But based off, of course, Kramer's, go undercover investigation, they believe that they were right, and that Barry, is in fact, purchasing illegal substances, and they were going to be sending Barry a letter of termination, And Kramer, of course, snuck in the picture of him sitting on the toilet, which, Jerry didn't know until later on it happened. So Newman was heading down to deliver it, to put it in the mailbox. Well, while he was doing that, they had this one guy stop by and drop off pizza for them. And he starts sniffing again. And just like they're barely asking, yeah, cold? He goes, no. He goes, and he says, and he asks Kramer about his sweater. Kramer was wearing the sweater that he had worn when he went to, they did their stakeout with Barry. Jerry had worn that sweater, the same sweater, at the restaurant at the beginning of the episode when they first saw Barry. And then Kramer mentions that the sweater is made of mohair. And the pizza guy says that he's allergic to mohair. And they put two and two together and realize that where they're wearing the sweaters. So then they realize, what if Barry is just allergic to mohair? And so Jerry goes chasing after Newman, trying to, get him to stop him from sending the letter. He doesn't want to turn it because he thinks they may have made a mistake. Well, Newman, who was waiting at the mailbox, did the same thing George did. He felt a woman's clothing, and of course the woman freaked out on him. I think he called for her husband. Newman ran away like a coward and dropped the letter, and the letter never got mailed. Fast forward to the last scene, they're at Monk's, and Elaine was happy that they finally came to their senses and believed that Barry was just allergic to the mohair, on the sweater. But then Jerry comes into the restaurant upset with a letter from his lawyer, and Barry had filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 11. Basically, filed for bankruptcy and basically took Jerry's money and ran. And basically, all along they were right. And they said, though, this could have all been avoided had Newman gotten the letter in the mailbox. And basically, Jerry was all out of money. Well, basically, Jerry does not get the money back that he had given to Barry Prophet. He wants to say Barry Kripke, but this is not the correct sitcom, though. So obviously, he wanted to get revenge on Newman. They see Newman come in and get some bear claws, and he's about to confront Newman until a woman walks up to Jerry, feels his material, and says, "Nice." And then it's like they're kind of hitting it off. So unfortunately, at the beginning of the episode, they had Jake and Elaine successful with the feeling the material. George and Newman were not successful with the feeling the material. But Jerry was, when a woman felt his material. How can you go wrong? But, yep, that's the Sniffing Accountant. Again, I feel it's a little bit underrated episode. I definitely enjoy it. Again, there's still nothing, though, that beats that scene with Kramer drinking the beer and smoking the cigarette at the same time. And Michael Richards saying inside look, saying that, I would rehearse stuff during the week, but once we got on camera, stuff just happened. But it was priceless. And of course, the barring any unforeseen incident, which just came back to bite them quite a bit. And that's a Sniffing Accountant, guys. Not much other really trivia, other than the fact that, again, this is based off of, Jerry's real-life accountant taking $50,000 from him and going off and, using it to buy illegal substances. And the bra salesman idea was Larry David did briefly actually work as a bra salesman. And whole exclamation points cause a breakup, barring any unforeseen business, the private investigators and whatnot. It was a pretty good episode. I like the Sniffing Accountant. Next, we'll move on to The Briss. Not an episode that I'm particularly the biggest fan of. It's just one of those episodes that's just there, and I forget even exists half the time. But we'll talk about it briefly next when we get to The Briss. So, guys, what were your thoughts on the Sniffing Accountant? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video, subscribe for more content on my channel, and follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirBoy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch y'all later. Have a great rest of your night, and peace out, everybody.